Hi everyone, and welcome to the Online Ocean Symposium. We're talking live with guests in New York and DC, where world governments will be meeting at the UN this week. They will be attempting to fulfill an important promise of the Rio Plus 20 commitment. They will be taking a decision on whether or not to begin negotiations to launch a new pivotal treaty that would help protect ungoverned areas of the ocean, those beyond national jurisdiction. This is a monumentous and exciting moment in the history of the ocean and ocean conservation. And it could start a process that would bring much needed law and protection to the the largest biosphere on Earth. I'm joined on this hangout today by ocean policy experts, campaigners, and law experts who are building a wave of change at the United Nations for a stronger international protection and governance of these high seas and areas beyond national jurisdiction. My first guest today is the director of the ocean campaigns at Pew Charitable Trust, Karen. Karen, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you, Andrew.
Thanks for being here. What are the high seas in these areas beyond national jurisdiction, and why should they be protected?
Well, as you mentioned, the high seas is the biggest biosphere on the planet. Essentially, it is everything beyond 200 nautical miles from the coast of various countries, and that makes up almost half of the surface area of Earth. In addition to that, of course, remember that because there is depth involved and volume, if you think of the water column going down, it's a huge area that's full of life. The great whales and sharks and tunas that migrate across the ocean highways and byways go across the high seas before entering the waters of various countries. There are huge underwater mountain chains that span the areas and that play host to a myriad of marine life.
You actually direct Pew's International Marine Program. What are Pew's goals and focus when it comes to ocean protection?
Well, the Pew Charitable Trust is a non-profit working internationally, and our biggest program is focused on ocean conservation. We focus really on a number of key areas. The first is on habitat protection and really establishing very large, fully protected areas. The science is absolutely clear about the need to establish fully protected areas to rebuild, to restock, and to grow resilience to change in the ocean. We also focus on ensuring sustainable fisheries for the long term, for the food that people eat, but also to maintain healthy ocean ecosystems. We do a lot of work on ensuring proper ocean governance, whether that's within the waters of various countries and regions or on the high seas. And then, of course, if you put in place all of those laws and regulations, you need to be able to enforce and monitor them correctly. And so we have a big program that is focused on ending illegal fishing globally and ensuring that sustainable fisheries and protected areas are managed properly for now and for the future.
Well, that's an excellent endeavor, and I'm assuming that this working group, this UN working group, is kind of a pivotal aspect in regards to ocean protection. I actually have a really cool infographic that you guys sent me that I'd love for you to go over. Can you tell me what we're looking at right now?
I could, yes, of course. Sorry, a little delay there. Yes, well, basically what that infographic does is it divides the planet into three areas, which is how we humans have essentially established lines in the sea. The oceans know no borders, but we establish them in order to make sure that the rules we put in place essentially work. And so what this shows us is that on land, which makes up about 29% of the Earth's surface, more than 12% of our land is protected as wilderness areas, as natural parks, where no extractive and destructive activities are allowed. Within country waters, which are the areas that stretch from the coastline out to 2 nautical miles, that covers about 28% of the Earth's surface, about 2% only of that area is fully protected. But there is increasing determination from countries and recognition that those areas need to be protected. And that requires really the action of a single state to a head of state, a prime minister or a president to decide to protect areas within their own waters. And then, of course, there are the high seas, which make up about 43% of the surface of the Earth. And as you can see in the infographic, less than 1% of this area is fully protected. That's despite the fact that the science shows that really at least 30% of that area should be fully protected if we want to make sure that we can regrow the diversity of life that is so essential to producing every second breath that we take, sequestering a lot of the carbon dioxide that we humans emit into the atmosphere. Some 25% of that is sequestered in the ocean, and making sure that all of the strange and wonderful critters that live out there, that many people eat as their primary source of animal protein, that they can regrow and rebuild and keep our planet healthy.
So let me backtrack a little bit here. How is it that these high seas and the areas beyond national jurisdiction and the protection that is needed there, how has that actually come to be discussed at the UN?
That's a great question, because it really goes to the nub of the issue this week. And this area of the high seas is governed by all countries. It's the responsibility of all countries. And in the 1980s, countries came together through the United Nations and negotiated a treaty called the United Nations Law of the Sea Convention. And that treaty is essentially the constitution for the oceans. It sets out the kind of articles by which countries need to cooperate in order to work together to make sure that this shared area is managed. But there have been a few gaps, and one of those key gaps is in how you would establish legally and then recognize protected areas on the high seas. And so actually this area came to international attention in 2002 at the World Summit on Sustainable Development in Johannesburg, where the issue of marine protected areas first arose. In 2004, as a result of discussions at the United Nations General Assembly, a group was convened, which is called the Ad Hoc, Open-Ended, Informal Working Group on Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction, which we fondly call BBNJ. And essentially, since then, countries have been coming together to talk about what to do to both protect marine life in this area and make sure that those shared resources are properly managed. In 2012, at the Rio Plus 20 meeting in Brazil, world leaders actually in the document that came out of that meeting agreed that because there had been almost 10 years of discussion at the UN, a decision needed to be made in 2014 as to whether to convene negotiations to put a treaty together which would enable the regulation or the establishment of protected areas on the high seas. And so the meeting in New York this week is all about getting to agreement on whether countries will negotiate that treaty or not.
Well, I know that the people watching at home, and I know for myself that, you know, watching the Rio Plus 20 and the various climate summits and all the different working groups, and those of us who are very interested in the ocean are very interested in how the process works and where it's going from here. So this is actually a great opportunity for me to introduce my next guest, UN diplomat to South Africa and Professor Dira Tadley.
Hi, Andrew.
Hi, welcome to the Hangout. How's it going?
Good, thanks. It's wonderful to be here.
All right. Well, first of all, I was wondering if you could explain a little bit. Is there a difference between the high seas and areas beyond national jurisdiction?
Well, the UN Convention, as Karen explained earlier, divides, if you like, areas of the oceans into different parts. And the, some one second. And some parts of these are referred to as the high seas. And the high seas essentially is the water column beyond areas of national jurisdiction. But beyond that, there's also the deep seabed, which is if you like, the land beneath the seas, but beyond areas of national jurisdiction, and this is then referred to as the area or the deep seabed. So both of those are areas beyond national jurisdiction, but the high seas are a particular portion of areas beyond national jurisdiction.
That definitely clarifies it. Apparently, somebody really wants to talk to you right now.
Yeah. 1 second.
No problem.
I'm gonna call. Yeah.
All right. So, as I mentioned, you are a UN diplomat to South Africa. Why is it important for South Africa and other African nations to support the high seas and these areas beyond national jurisdiction?
Well, I think for all the reasons that Karen mentioned. So the fact that the oceans is responsible for the air that we breathe, for nutrition, food, and sustenance, but also really because the biodiversity in the ocean is valuable in and of itself. It's a heritage that we have. I mean, I think we have a responsibility because we have received this heritage to protect it. So that is, I guess, a global reason why there's a responsibility on all of us, on all states, to want to protect the oceans. But for African states in particular, 38 out of the 53 African states are either coastal states or island states. And Africa has a really long coastline. So there are very specific reasons why Africans and African states should want to protect the oceans and the sea, in addition to all the other more general reasons that make it incumbent on all of us to want to protect the sea. And in fact, the African Union has decided that 2015 to 2025 should be the African decade for the oceans. I think also then recognizing the importance of the oceans for African states in general, and African people as well.
Interesting. The African nations decade of the ocean. I'm kind of curious as to what that would entail. But let me ask, why is a biodiversity agreement for areas beyond national jurisdiction under UNCLOS politically important for developing countries? You kind of went into this a little bit on the economic side, but I was wondering if you could delve a little bit further.
Yeah. So as a matter of politics, if one thinks about the last decade or 2 decades, and the involvement of developing states in various negotiations relating to environmental agreements, 2 of the themes that have run through, I think, the positions of developing states have been, on the one hand, equity, and on the other hand, solidarity. And I think in terms of the issues that are being discussed in the context of this possible agreement, all of these issues revolve, I think, around these 2 themes of equity on the one hand and solidarity. If one thinks about the rallying cry, for example, of developing states in the context of these negotiations, the so-called common heritage of mankind, it really, on the one hand, espouses this idea of solidarity, the idea that that the ocean is a heritage that we all have, and so we should all want to protect it, because it is our heritage and we should act in solidarity in that respect. But it also calls for equity in the sense that it says to all of us that the benefits that arise from the exploration and exploitation of the resources in the oceans should be equitably shared. And so in a sense, you see the themes that have been important for developing states in the course of various negotiations on environmental issues coming to the fore in the context of this agreement. So to the extent that this agreement can be, or at least the negotiations for these agreements can be launched this week, and hopefully an agreement reached at some point gives the possibility of attaining these two themes, which, by the way, are already reflected in the UN Convention. And so really what we're trying to do is we're trying to give effect to them in a way that is not possible in sort of a framework convention that we have in the context of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea.
For those of us who don't know and aren't really aware of the process at home, what is the process of these working groups? How do they work? How do stakeholders get involved, and who usually comes to the table?
Well, normally who usually comes to the table is states, and of course states have been engaging in discussions. Most of it has been, for the longest part, at least for the last 10 years, generally just general discussions about what can be done and what can't be done. The other stakeholders, of course, are NGOs and civil society. They also have a role to play. Unfortunately, the role tends to be rather limited because this is a state-centric process. And one of the things that I know that Karen would like to talk about, of course, is the importance of ensuring greater openness and ensuring that civil society that represents not only state interest but general interests are also able to participate.
Well, that actually leads me right into my next guest. Sophia Sednikli, you are the Senior Oceans Policy Advisor for Greenpeace, which actually represents a larger common factor when it comes to the ocean and comes to environmental interests in general. Welcome to the program.
Hello, Andrew.
Can you tell us a little bit about how Greenpeace has been campaigning for the oceans?
Yeah, Greenpeace has been campaigning for many years for ocean protection, in particular for the establishment of a network of ocean sanctuaries from pole to pole, and for sustainable and fair fisheries. We have offices in 40 countries around the world, and more than 3 million registered supporters, as well as many, many more online supporters. People actually, joining our campaigns and doing. For example, signing petitions or taking more direct action to call for ocean protection. We use a number of tools to bring the message to governments. Often we use our ships. We have 3 ships, and we are able to go out to the sea and identify, monitor, and often also take non-violent direct action against illegal or destructive fisheries. We work with local communities, small-scale fishermen, for example, who depend on the oceans for food and livelihoods. We also do political work, and we bring the voices of the people, who want to protect the ocean to government, speaking truth to power.
You mentioned your ships. I actually followed very, very closely the work that you guys were doing in the Arctic in regards to resource extraction, the new wells that were going in, and the various issues that were happening there. Can you speak a little bit about how Greenpeace is involved in this working group and the actions of the UN when it comes to protecting the high seas?
Of course. We work in coalition with other NGOs. The High Seas Alliance is a coalition that brings together 29 NGOs in the IUCN to work in collaboration for the High Seas Biodiversity Agreement that hopefully we'll see soon. We have online campaigns, and people are able to join that and send their messages to the governments. For example, if you could show the link on to the UN Ocean Resolution 2015 campaign that we're having at the moment. We're asking people to go online and send their ocean resolution for this year, for 2015, and also ask governments to do the bit, to do the right thing this year, and agree to launch negotiations for a High Seas Biodiversity Agreement. And through the High Seas Alliance, we also have a campaign called the Wave of Change, and people can join that hashtag and join our Thunderclap that starts tomorrow. And hopefully thousands of people will be speaking to the governments and telling them what we want in terms of high seas protection, that they need to take responsibility and and stand on the right side of history in terms of protecting the high seas, and agree to launch negotiations for a high seas agreement. Andrew, I cannot hear you for some reason.
Sorry, I was just mentioning the fact that I've actually been wearing my High Seas Alliance Wave of Change wristband for probably too long now, and showing both in-person and digital support. Can you mention a little bit about what should a new BBNJ biodiversity agreement contain, from your perspective?
Yes, as Karen Deere already said, there are some very important gaps in terms of the legal framework for ocean protection. One of the key things is a mechanism to establish marine protected areas and marine reserves on the high seas. Currently, less than 1% is protected, and we need a legal mechanism to allow for the establishment of large areas and a network of areas across the ocean. We also need a mechanism to be able to conduct environmental impact assessments. Currently, there is no way to assess the impact of a human activity in the ocean, especially also the cumulative impact. What are we doing when we go out there either to fish, drill, or mine the ocean? What are the impacts to the ocean? How does each activity add on to every other activity, and how do we affect the health of the high seas, the health of the oceans? We also would like to see a centralized, global system to monitor and control activities on the high seas, to end the Wild West that currently exists out there, so that we know who does what and who follows the rules and who doesn't out in the ocean. And of course, a mechanism to share the benefits from the use of marine genetic resources that Dire mentioned earlier, and capacity building and transfer of technology from the north to the south.
I'm very glad that you mentioned MPAs, or marine protected areas. That was a big focus at the World Parks Congress in Sydney just a month or two ago, and we actually had the ability to have a whole bunch of great hangouts regarding marine protected areas, both in how to manage small ones, how to create large ones, and the actual impacts that they've had, mainly on fisheries, but also on various other aspects as well, including resource management, including tourism, including just the health of the oceans. And it was shown that marine protected areas actually have very, very high impact. And I was wondering, for those governments who are still deciding on whether to support this new agreement and support the establishment of these types of protections, do you have anything to say to those governments, either personally or as a representative of Greenpeace?
I would tell them to stand on the right side of history and join the large majority of states that already support the launch of this agreement. Without healthy oceans, there can be no sustainable future for the planet, and they should not stand in the way of that. And they should also listen to the calls of thousands and thousands of people out there who have sent their messages and ask them to do the right thing and protect the high seas.
I think that's a great message to present to them. I want to remind those viewing at home that you can actually ask questions of our panel directly through the Q&A function of the Google Hangout. Otherwise, you can tweet us at High Seas Alliance, and we will try to get to your questions if we have time. For now, I'd like to go a bit to a group discussion question, and I know that we kind of covered this a little bit, but why should people care about the high seas and the seabed? There's many people living both in Europe, in the United States, and various landlocked areas that might not have any direct relationship to the sea. Karen, can you cover this first?
Sure. Andrew, I'd like you to breathe in and breathe out, and then breathe in and breathe out again. And that second breath, and every second breath that all of us take, comes from the ocean. So if we want air to breathe, we need a healthy ocean. There's a paper that came out just last week. There was a big article in the New York Times about it, where the science is essentially showing how important our ocean is to climate regulation, to the weather, that the oceans, in fact, last year warmed by 1 degree, and the impacts, the potential negative impacts that could have for life on Earth. So we really need to take care of our oceans and keep them healthy, and the science shows that the more life there is in the ocean, the better able our ocean is to regulate the weather, create oxygen, and take in carbon dioxide. The other important thing, I think, for those of us who are not scientists, over time, it's become fascinating to learn that, for example, all of the primary production, the tiny little creatures that feed the bigger creatures, in the ocean, a lot of that comes up from the poles, particularly around Antarctica, and comes up through the great ocean currents. These are conveyor belts that take nutrients all around the ocean. And a lot of those conveyor belts cycle through the high seas into the coastal areas that then feed some of the great fisheries that provide protein for people. So the sardine fisheries along the coasts of Latin America and Africa, and the anchoveta fisheries, these are fed by these great ocean currents that bring those nutrients up. So the high seas may seem out of sight and out of mind, but without them, everything we do is challenged. This is part of one of the ocean commissioners, actually, from the Global Ocean Commission. In their report, they describe the global ocean, the high seas, as the kidneys of our planet. These are the great cleaning areas, and they provide all of these huge, whether it's nutrients or oxygen or CO2 sequestration for all of us. The challenge we have is that there is no dialysis machine for these kidneys, and so we have to keep them healthy if we want a healthy planet for the future.
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, but Sophia, I'd love to get your perspective on this question of why everybody should paying attention to the high seas and the seabed.
Yeah, Karen is absolutely right. I would only add a couple of numbers here, that 80% of, or more than 80% of commercial fish are already overexploited or depleted. 90% of the big predators out there are gone. The oceans provide protein to more than 3 billion people, and these are just numbers to show how important the oceans are to all of us, and that often the ocean crisis is the price for the ocean crisis is not paid by those exploiting it, but by millions and billions of people around the world that depend on the oceans for their lives. And this is I think the key aspect of these negotiations, in my view. There's been a lot of emphasis on ocean exploitation in the past decades. Governments have come together to set rules on how to divide and how to organize the way they use the ocean or the ocean resources. So they have agreed rules on how to fish. They have agreed rules on how to drill and how to mine in the ocean, but they have not agreed rules on how to protect the ocean. And by protecting the ocean, also protecting all those thousands of, it's not thousands, it's millions of people out there. So this is exactly what we're asking them to do this week, and what actually they have been working towards in the past years, to finally come together and take this historic decision to launch negotiations for an agreement for marine life in the ocean.
You know, you touched on something that's very, very important, which is the environmental justice angle of all this. Those who are affected most by environmental change, either climate change or biodiversity, are usually those who are least represented or have the least amount of power. So thank you very much for bringing that up. Dira, I'd love to get your opinion on this issue. Why should people pay attention?
Yeah, I think that those two answers that we've just got are really great answers, and it's difficult to add to them. There is just one thing I will say, though, and it's to focus in again on this heritage thing that I spoke about earlier. The fact that you don't engage on a daily basis with the oceans is independent of the importance of the oceans for all of these reasons that have been mentioned, is not a reason not to care. I mean, there are many people who never interact with elephants or rhinos, and yet no one would ever question whether or not we should be engaging in actions to protect elephants and rhinos. And for the very same reason, the oceans are our heritage, and I think there's a responsibility on all of us, just by that reason alone, even if we didn't get the air that we so desperately need, just for that reason alone, I think that is a sufficient reason for us to care about what happens to the ocean.
That is an excellent answer. While I got you here, I'm going to ask you the next panel question first. Do you think that this BBNJ meeting will be a success? I know it's pretty direct, but
that's the million-dollar question, and I guess the short answer is I guess the short answer is that it depends on the political will of states, and it seems it's going to be a difficult road, because while the majority of delegations are supportive of an implementing agreement, there is few but very powerful delegations that are opposed to the idea of an implementing agreement. But here is a positive sign, I guess. This process started around between 2004 to 2006. Up until 2009, I think you had at most 3 or 4 delegations speaking about implementing agreement as the solution to the problem that was being discussed. We now arrive at 2014, 2015, and the vast majority of delegations, there is this convergence of views, with the exception of a very small minority, small but powerful minority, but there is suddenly a convergence of views, and this, I think, should give hope for the next couple of days. The challenge, of course, is to try to make sure that this few but very powerful minority does not create divisions amongst those who are really interested in ensuring that at the end of this week the United Nations takes a decision to launch negotiations towards an implementing agreement.
Well, here's hoping. Sophia, what's your take on this? Do you think it's going to be a success?
I think it has to be. It has to be a success because of all the reasons that we've outlined this past hour, and I hope that governments realize that the momentum and the the public demand for ocean protection is so strong out there, and that they react to that. There have been many years of talks, and now is really the time for action. And we will be there to bring the voices of the people into the meeting, so that governments have the opportunity to listen and reflect as well on the urgency of the ocean crisis. And we will be there to support in any way we can for a positive result this week.
Karen, your thoughts?
I have to agree with Sophia and Dire. You know, we are truly seeing a wave of support by countries from north to south, east to west, of the need to do something. There's been a discussion going on for a decade. We don't have time to keep talking about this. The majority of countries, the majority of people around the world are in support of action to create very large, fully protected areas around the world to protect this common heritage, to recognize that it is part of the joint responsibility of everyone and not just those who exploit it. And we are very hopeful that this week the countries will come together at the United Nations and agree to move forward. Again, you know, the science is so clear that action is needed. The policy is clear, and the majority of states are behind this. It's time to move the discussion into formal negotiation, and then to work quickly towards an agreement so that we can establish high seas protected areas and make sure that this common heritage is protected for generations to come.
Let's hope that wave of change turns into a tsunami. We actually have a really relevant question from the audience here. What happens if countries ask for more time to discuss, say, another BBNJ meeting? Karen, do you want to try and field this one since I got you on?
Sure. There's every possibility that that may happen. This issue, as I mentioned, and Dire and Sophia have said as well, has been under discussion for 10 years. Every potential element of what needs to be discussed has been put before the assembled states at the United Nations. There's a clear package that has been agreed that needs to be taken forward, and I think and would very much hope that the countries recognize that there's no need for another meeting. There's also just a reminder to those countries that the leaders at the Rio +20 summit said that a decision needed to be taken before September 2015 on this issue, and so the time really is now to move things forward.
Your thoughts on that? What happens if they ask for more time and don't meet this deadline?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's possible that some states will say we need more time, we need another BBNJ meeting. In fact, it's not only possible; it has already been asked. I guess at the last BBNJ meeting, there were already some states that were suggesting that we might need more time. It's clear that we don't need more time because at the last two BBNJ meetings, we didn't even exhaust the time that was available. It should be remembered that the General Assembly in 2013 decided that there would be 3 BBNJ meetings and more if necessary, and so potentially left open the possibility for a 4th BBNJ meeting if necessary. What's also important to understand, though, is that in order for there to be a 4th BBNJ meeting, there has to be another decision by the General Assembly. And that's not likely to happen because a sufficiently large group of states have made it very clear that they do not support a 4th BBNJ meeting, and that they expect that this meeting will make a recommendation one way or the other relating to the launching of negotiations, and that if that doesn't happen, then we'll need to start thinking about an alternative. And of course, some people have already started thinking about alternatives if there isn't a recommendation.
Well, hopefully that's not necessary. Sophia, your take on what happens if somebody asks for an extension or the deadline isn't met?
Just a small addition, perhaps, to what Karen Deere said. The asking for another meeting for some means a way of delaying the decision rather than asking for more time for deliberations, because there has been ample time for that. If the Rio+20 deadline is not respected, then there are other ways of trying to solve the ocean crisis in a piecemeal way, of course, but not under the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea umbrella. I think it's in the benefit of all the countries to come together and take decisions together than pushing the governments that do want to protect the ocean into doing what they can on their own, let's say. So it's a matter of countries coming together. It's a matter of taking responsibility, and I would say that one day before the meeting starts, I would not like to already start talking about another one, but I would really want to see what happens in these next 4 days, and focus all the energy into getting a positive outcome.
So, Sophia, what can people do who aren't either UN delegates or stakeholders who have been called in to testify? What can those at home, all around the world, do to pay attention and support the efforts of this ad hoc meeting and the efforts of it?
I mentioned earlier our online campaigns, and I really think it's very important for people to speak out and tell the governments what they want in terms of ocean protection. So they have the opportunity to do that through the Greenpeace online campaign on letting everybody know of their own ocean resolution for 2015 and asking governments to agree to a high seas biodiversity agreement as their own ocean resolution for this year. They can follow our hashtags, Ocean Lovers, and also the High Seas Alliance hashtag Wave of Change campaign. Join the Thunderclap and really push this week to build up this major global voice that hopefully our governments will listen to and take the right decision for the high seas.
Here's hoping. I know that I personally have already signed up for the Thunderclap on 2 accounts, so there you go. Karen, yourself, any thoughts on what people can and should be doing at home in regards to this process?
Sure. Both Greenpeace and the Pew Charitable Trusts are members of the High Seas Alliance. It's a broad coalition of organizations from around the world that is working for high seas protection. And as Sophia said, get onto that webpage, join the Thunderclap, use the hashtag of Wave of Change. And for those people who really want to make a difference as well, write to your Foreign Affairs Department, your Foreign Affairs Minister, the State Department in the US. It doesn't matter which country you happen to be in. It is important for those folks to understand that you care about the global ocean, that you are watching what's happening at the UN this week. We certainly, from the side of the High Seas Alliance and Pew, will be tweeting and providing as much information as we can to folks who are interested in this process. As Dere said, this is a state-run process, and so we are not entirely sure that NGOs will be allowed to participate in the full deliberations, and we want to make sure that that happens. So if people can keep watching, can retweet, can really pay attention to some of these issues and make sure that their leaders understand that this is not an issue that nobody cares about. This is an issue that for all of us goes to the heart of every breath that we take, and the amazing life that our ocean provides. That is something we all need to be cognizant of, and we need to make our leaders understand how important our ocean is for us. This week is a moment of decision to show that, and we hope that the countries at the UN will make the right decision to move these discussions forward.
Wow, that you totally hit the nail on the head from my perspective. But Dira, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's hard to add anything to that. I think that was absolutely perfect. The only thing that I would say, I guess as a diplomat, would just be to emphasize the point that was just made now by Karen, that you have to speak to your governments, write to your governments, because ultimately I think governments will listen to their citizenry, particularly democratic governments that know that at some point there will be elections. So I think that's the only really point that I can emphasize, is talk to your governments, make sure that they know that this is an important issue to you.
Make sure that your government serves you. We are currently coming towards the end of this hangout, and I want to give each of the participants a ability to wrap up or summarize their thoughts about the process, about our conversation here, and just give some final parting thoughts. I'd love to throw it to you, Karen, since you hit the nail on the head last time. I'd love you to start us off on our final thoughts.
Well, I hope for those folks who've joined the hangout, they have begun to get an understanding of the importance of the ocean and the high seas to our daily lives, and that they'll become involved in putting, taking what is beneath the waves, and sometimes out of sight and so out of mind, and bringing it to the top table, to our leaders to understand that the ocean is something we all need to care about. We're beginning to see that this wave of change is being recognized, whether it was by Secretary Kerry at the Our Ocean conference last year. The Chilean government is showing great leadership. The South African government, is represented here by, Dira, is really showing leadership on this. The Pacific Island states and the European Union are all behind the need to protect ocean life and make sure that we can restore and revitalize this amazing place on our planet. And we just hope that this is a week for decision making at the United Nations, that countries can join together and take on that responsibility that they have all been given, and to make sure that the equity element is brought in there. Our high seas are a place that is not just for extraction, but a place that provides life to everyone across the planet. And we need to make sure that action now is taken as we look to 2015, a year of key decisions on climate and on oceans. This is the week that the wave can begin to grow and push those decisions forward, leaders standing up and saying it is time to take action for our collective future, and that is what we hope to see.
Fantastic. Dira, your last final thoughts on this?
Yeah, really quickly. The ocean is really important. It is our ocean. It is not the ocean that belongs to big states, big fishing states, shipping states, deep sea mining states. It is the ocean that belongs to all of us, all of humanity. And that means that all of us have a responsibility to do what we can, including through talking to our governments, to make sure that it is well protected. All of us have a responsibility to make sure that the benefits that come from the ocean is enjoyed by all on an equitable basis. The next couple of days are key to starting a process, and let's just emphasize this is the beginning of a process, because once you launch negotiations, the next part is to make sure that you negotiate in such a way that the treaty that comes out is in fact sufficiently robust to ensure that we meet the objectives. So really my hope is that this week will be the beginning of something really significant towards this road of ensuring that we're able to protect this, which is so important for all of us.
I'm sure that everybody on this panel and those watching at home totally echo your hopes on that subject. Sophia, final thoughts?
2015, I think, is the year that we will remember later on and say that was the year that when the negotiations for this very, very important UN agreement for the health and productivity of the oceans was launched. Rio Plus 20 set the deadline, and I think the governments will do the right thing, and I think they will hopefully come together in consensus to start negotiating this ocean agreement. If not, the large majority of states hopefully will still go forward with this agreement. People out there have raised their voices. Thousands and thousands of people have signed petitions, have spoken to their leaders, have done their bit to show how important the oceans are. And I hope and I wish for 2015 that is what will happen. And the start of it hopefully will be this week.
Well, thank you very much for your final thoughts. I gotta say that I really hope that 2015 is this big year of change for our oceans and for our ocean policy. For those of you watching at home, thank you so much for your excellent questions. Thanks for coming and joining. I want to thank my excellent panel for having an amazing conversation that definitely shone some light on the process, so some of the ins and outs of this ad hoc working group and where we can go from here. For me personally, I'd have to say that for a wave of change to work well, we have to remember that we make up the wave of change, that the UN is a representative body, and that they should listen to who they represent. So be a part of this wave of change, be active, and hopefully we can make a huge splash. Everybody at home, thanks for watching, and keep on swimming.